Hey guys, today we're in the book of First Chronicles chapter 10. Well, let me congratulate you. You made it through the first 9 chapters. I understand those were rough. There are a lot of names and hard reading, but you made it through. And so now we're to the beginning of the good part, right? So the historical kind of narrative and proof of Israel has been set in those first 9 chapters, and now we start with chapter 10. But let me remind you, Chronicles is the last book of the Hebrew Bible. This is written after the exile of Babylon. They've come back to Jerusalem. They're rebuilding Jerusalem. And this is to remind them who they are and that there's still hope. God hasn't given up on them. There is a new king to come, a new David. And so as we start to read kind of what we've already read in Kings, there's going to be some new things that we learn about certain kings. There's going to be some repetitive things that we read about kings, but they're going to be very concise, smaller stories. The point is not to give historical data, though some of it does. The point is to show the king, what was good about them or what was bad about them, and how the new king, the messianic king, is different than the king, the earthly king that reigned. So as we're reading through the kings again, it's not just to give us information, it's to give hope of the king to come, right? Hope of the future. So when we get to chapter 10, we get one chapter on the first king of Israel, and that's the king of Saul, right? And so we're going back to 1 Samuel, right? Where it was at. And we just get a little concise chapter, a few verses on King Saul. But you'll see what I mean by what the point of the chronicler is getting across to these new Jews coming out of Babylon, rebuilding Jerusalem. What did Saul mean to them? All right, so let's kind of get to it. Chapter 10, verse 1, the Philistines are coming against Israel, and Israel fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Now, if you remember back in 1 Samuel chapter 28, this happened because Saul saw them, and scripture says, and he feared them. He did not have hope and faith in God. He feared Philistines, and God allowed them to be defeated, right? So it was a lack of hope in God, a lack of perseverance in God, and that's why they fell. And not only was Israel defeated, but we see that Saul and his sons were killed, right? So it wasn't just Saul, it was the descendants of Saul. And we see a little bit how he was killed, right? Remember, the arrows went. He begged his armor bearer to kill him. He wouldn't, so he fell on his own sword. And verse 6, thus Saul died, and he died with his sons and all of his house. They died together, right? So that's it. Saul died. But then we get this little story, right? The next day, the Philistines stripped him, took off all of his clothes, carrying around his head, his dead body, has the armor. And what do? They take his armor and they take them around to their idols, to their temple, proclaiming basically that their God, and we see it's Dagon, this false god, is bigger than the God of the Israelites, is bigger than the God of Saul, right? So Dagon is, they're using this to support that Dagon is better and bigger than Yahweh. Well, of course, Yahweh's not going to put up with this. So what happens? Verse 11, we see that the men of Yabesh Gilead comes and steals the body back of Saul. And I know we read, and it was a many sleeps ago, but Saul actually saved the men, or really the whole city of Yabesh Gilead. If you remember, the Amorites were coming in, they were invade them. Saul comes in and saves them. He defeats the Amorites, and now these men, the valiant men of this city, are gonna do what is right. And they go and they get the body of Saul. They bring them back, and so they allowed him to bury his bones, and it gives him a proper burial. But then in verse 13 it says, and this is the most important part of the chapter, Saul died for a breach of faith. How come Saul died? How come he was the first king, but how come he wasn't a great king? Because of his unfaithfulness. If there's anything you need to take away from this, is Saul, the king, was unfaithful. And that's why he did not make it. He broke faith, did not keep the command of the Lord. He consulted a medium. He did not seek guidance from the Lord. And so you just get a list of what he has done wrong. So for these Israelites who have now went to Babylon, and we're told by the writer of Kings and Chronicles that the reason that they were taken to Babylon was why? Because of Israel's unfaithfulness. And now Saul was not a good king, and he was destroyed. He was allowed to die because why? Of his unfaithfulness. So for these Israelites that are now back in Israel, the promised land, they're rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem, this new king that they're looking for, what is something they should be looking for? The new David will be what? Faithful. He'll be faithful to the Lord. They were not, Saul was not, but the new king, the new David, the Messiah, will be faithful unto the Lord. He will not break faith with him. He will keep the command of the Lord. He will not consult mediums, and he will seek guidance from the Lord. And so these are all check marks of Jesus, right? We know the Messiah. We know what he did, and he always, even to the cross, went under the guidance of the Lord, right? He was faithful. And so that's so important. And so therefore the Lord put him to death, Saul, and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse. Now there'll be some years until David is fully king, but we can see what's happening. And if you remember, why did God choose David? It's not because he was royalty, not because he was anybody, because why? After Saul was unfaithful, God said, I want a man after my own heart. I want somebody that is faithful. And that's why David was picked. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we'll see you tomorrow in chapter 11. God bless.